Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges that we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we could go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we're both sober and happy. Recovery is a journey that requires a lot of mental, emotional, and physical energy. If we're not careful, we could find ourselves wasting energy on things that don't serve us, making it harder to stay focused and motivated. So what are the biggest energy wasters to avoid, and how can we reduce or eliminate them? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. While I was still drinking, I tried quitting several times. Many of those days that I tried to stay sober, I was strong all day. In the afternoon, I felt good and I was confident I would make it through the day. But in the evening, it seemed like all my willpower had been sucked dry, and eventually I gave in to the urge to drink. Sometimes something minor happened that pushed me over the edge. Other times, there was no events that set me off. I simply gave in to a craving. Many times I'd put days together and it seemed to be going great, and then one day it seemed like all my willpower was sucked dry. Here's what I learned. Willpower requires energy, and we only have a limited amount of energy each day. When we waste it on things that deplete that energy, we won't have it when needed. And this isn't just about saving energy to use for willpower to resist drinking. If we use our energy on things that do not benefit us, we do not have as much available for the things that are most important to us in life. So what are some of the biggest energy wasters that we should be aware of? One of the biggest offenders is holding on to resentment and anger. Think of a time when you got into a big argument with someone. After the adrenaline from the argument wears off, you often find yourself worn out or even exhausted. So why are we so tired after an argument? It isn't like we just ran a marathon or worked a hard, laborious day. That is because anger and resentment is a huge energy suck. Carrying around negative emotions is like carrying a heavy backpack everywhere you go. It's exhausting and could weigh you down mentally and emotionally. In recovery, addressing these feelings rather than letting them fester is important. One way to release resentment and anger is through forgiveness. This doesn't mean condoning the actions that hurt you, but rather choosing to let go of the negative emotions associated with them. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying that pain. Forgiveness is so critical to the recovery process that I have several episodes about it. If you're struggling with this topic, I would suggest starting with episode 4. The next energy waster is negative self-talk and self-doubt. Our inner dialogue has a powerful impact on our mood and energy levels. Constantly telling ourselves that we're not good enough or that we're going to fail drains our energy and motivation. Now, I have struggled with this greatly over the years, and I still do today. If I had a penny for every time I called myself a dumbass, stupid, a loser, or told myself that I wasn't good enough, I'd be sitting pretty well financially right now. To combat this today, I practice positive self-talk. Here's the thing though, our acceptance of talking negatively about ourselves is often so strong that we don't even defend ourselves anymore. For me, it was happening so much that I didn't even catch myself doing it half the time because it was just a normal part of the day, like waking up and making a cup of coffee. It could become a daily habit, and we need to change that. The first step is recognizing when you do it. For example, if I think of something I did in my past, it is very common in that moment of guilt that I would lash out at myself and say, "How could you do something like that? You're a real piece of garbage." So when I do that, instead of just accepting it like I would in the past, I stop myself right there. The next thing I do is challenge that thought. This is where we need to learn to start defending ourselves against ourselves. This could be hard at first, but I find it easier to think of someone I love. How would I react if someone else said that thing about them? I wouldn't accept it. I would say something. Well, we need to extend that same courtesy to ourselves. So in my example, I would stop and say, "Hey, you're talking about something I did 15 years ago. I was in a bad place then, and I made many poor decisions. I was doing the best I could at the time, considering my life circumstances up to that point. I am not the same person today, so I will not let you continue to judge me for my past." But we shouldn't stop there. we need to create a new habit of talking positively about ourselves also. So I would continue by saying something like this: today, I am someone I could be proud of. I've gotten myself out of that old life. I've done my best to make right the wrongs of my past. I am proud of myself today. For the longest time, I would just say these things to myself in my head, and although slightly effective, the real magic started when I started to say them out loud. Luckily, I live alone, so I don't look crazy walking around the house talking to myself. The key is to break the habit of negative self-talk. Try different methods and find out what works best for you, and I promise you will start seeing the results quickly. Another significant energy waster is toxic relationships. Surrounding ourselves with people who are unsupportive or negative can drain our energy and make it harder to stay focused on our recovery. And this just isn't toxic relationships with people we are close to. We can waste tons of energy on toxic relationships with strangers on social media. I can't tell you how often I have wasted so much energy debating a topic with some random person on Facebook. It is important to evaluate the relationships in our lives and make changes where necessary. This doesn't mean cutting off everybody who isn't perfect, but it does mean setting healthy boundaries and prioritizing relationships that support your sobriety and well-being. Another thing I did personally was to do some housekeeping on my social media. You know, we all have those friends who are always posting negative things, who always seem to annoy us with their posts, or even friends who are still out partying and posting pictures that trigger us. Now, we don't have to unfriend these people on social media. All you have to do is hit that unfollow button, and you'll still be friends, but you will no longer have their posts filling your social media. The next energy waster is dwelling on the past. Reflecting on our past mistakes and regrets is natural, but constantly reliving these moments can be draining. We touched on this a little while discussing negative self-talk, but this could go much deeper than feeling regret. Often when I think about past parts of my life that I regret and the harm that they caused to myself and other people, I start trying to wish away the past. I call this getting a case of the woulda, coulda, and shouldas. They usually start like this: if I only would have done this differently, my life would be so much better. If this wouldn't have happened to me, I could have had a better life. I should have done this instead of that. Then I end up going down a rabbit hole and trying to change my present by changing my past. I'll give you an example. Before my drinking started to completely control my life looked like it was on the fast track to success. I got my bachelor's degree when I was 20. I had plans to start my master's degree right afterwards, which I would have earned by the time I was 22. I was on the trajectory for great career success. But I got drunk instead. Now, since getting sober, I've done a good job of rebuilding my career and building a great life for myself. I was proud of all of this and happy with my life, and then I ran into a guy I went to college with. He continued on the trajectory I planned to go down and had a very successful career. He was a big shot executive sitting in box seats at the baseball game where I ran into him. He drove a fancy car and had an amazing house in Scottsdale, Arizona. As I listened to him talk about how he was doing since I last saw him, the thought came into my head: if I would have only stayed sober when I was 20, this is where I could be right now. I started replaying all the bad decisions that ended up leading to me living on my mom's couch again when I was 34 after getting out of rehab. I started imagining how I could have been a big shot corporate executive by the time I was 34, like my friend was then. I started thinking about how I could be living in a house like the one he owns instead of living in my rental. My mind just kept going and thinking about how everything could be if I could only go back and change the past. Instead of enjoying the baseball game I was at, I was completely consumed by these thoughts. But it didn't stop there, as this went on for days. It led not only to guilt, but also resentment towards my current life, one I was completely happy with until I started to imagine a fictional version that I thought would be so much better. I stopped appreciating everything wonderful in my life because I kept wishing things would be better if I could only change things in the past. When we do that, all progress in our current lives is completely halted because we are spending all of our energy trying to do the impossible by changing past scenarios to change our current circumstances. What if instead of using that energy to try to change the past, we use it to try to change the present and focus on creating a better future? We could influence that. That is energy well spent. This isn't about conserving our energy, but redirecting it to things that positively influence our lives. This can be hard at first, and when you start practicing it, just winging it often can be challenging and even become an energy waster itself. This is why I found it important to start creating structure and routine for ourselves. Without a clear plan for our days, wasting time and energy on unpredictable activities becomes easy. Having a routine provides a sense of stability and helps us use our time and energy more efficiently. Another benefit is that it'll keep us from getting stuck in that energy waster for too long. I have yet to find a way to completely ignore everything that sucks energy from me, but I have found that when I do find myself stuck in a negative space, my routine could help me get back on track. For example, I could wake up in a good mood, but something at work could happen that upsets me. I start focusing all my energy on that and don't even realize it. If I'm not on a routine that gets me back on track, that mood could trickle into the evening and continue into the night, and I might even wake up still stuck in that space the next morning. However, right now I go to the gym after work, breaking that cycle. That doesn't mean that every time I go to the gym it completely clears my head, but it increases the chances of letting go of a frustrating day at work to focus on better things that evening. To create a productive routine, start by setting daily goals and prioritizing your tasks. Make some time for self-care, work, and fun. Having a balanced schedule could help you stay focused and energized throughout the day. Remember, recovery is not just about avoiding alcohol. It's about creating a life that is fulfilling and sustainable. By managing your energy wisely, you could build a strong foundation for long-term sobriety and happiness. We have the choice of where to dedicate our energy, so choose wisely and you will reap the benefits. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. Here's your weekly challenge. Think of the biggest energy waster in your life today. Ask yourself, is this benefiting my life? What could I better use this energy on? How much better would my life be if I could just let this go? Then, let it go. That is my challenge for you this episode. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening and keep living sober and happy.